Freddy Krueger, the king of nightmares and the bastard of 100 Maniacs, is by far the coolest slasher villain there is. Much like a few presidents, this guy doesn't care about who gets offended. He does what he likes and embraces it in all its glory. Having said that, Freddy is a vile and wild slasher who's notorious for being difficult to kill. How does he do this? How does his origin and rather grim backstory help his cause? In this video, we will answer questions like these and then some more. So let's not waste any time in building up an intro and get to the 13 disturbing physiological facts about Freddy Krueger. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Freddy, the bastard son of 100 Maniacs.
The progeny of 100 Maniacs. Now, that statement might seem scientifically incorrect, because we know how only one man and woman can create a child. But let me tell you what actually happened, and then you can tell me if it makes sense to say that Freddy was the child of 100 Maniacs. So, in 1907, Springwood, Ohio saw the birth of a sweet young girl named Amanda Krueger. By the time she attained the age of 18, she devoted herself to the cause of Christ and became one of his brides, a nun. She was now working at Hadaway House, which was also known as the Weston Hills Asylum. One evening, more specifically in December of 1942, the other staff, in a rush to go home, locked Amanda up in a room with 100 crazies. Yes, they did it inadvertently, but it did not end well for poor Amanda, who was defiled by nearly all of them all night long. And when she was finally found, she was barely alive. A few months later, she gave birth to a child named Frederick Charles Krueger, the son of Amanda and one of the 100 crazies who had defiled the bride of Christ. You see, this whole thing was written with the ink of sin on pages that were evil. Nevertheless, Amanda could not bring this child up, and Frederick Charles Krueger was placed under the custody of one Mr. Underwood, an alcoholic man who was up to no good. Naturally, Frederick, aka Freddy's origin as well as upbringing, was nothing a child deserves. By the time Freddy reached elementary school, he began to show his true nature. His first violent outburst came when he took the life of the class hamster and showed little to no remorse. What made it worse was the fact that kids in his class would bully him by calling him the son of 100 maniacs, and for a child like Freddy, already abused and deprived of a warm environment or a happy childhood, he did not take it well. Freddy Krueger started to abuse himself using a shaving razor, but he would find pleasure in doing so. Sounds a bit like the Cenobites, doesn't it? Anyway, he would eventually use this same razor to kill his adoptive father, Mr. Underwood. Of course, this was an act of self-defense as well as revenge, because Underwood had been beating Freddy up all his life and was doing so even when Freddy attacked Underwood with the razor. All in all, Freddy's entire childhood, right from his birth, was a hellhole, and what he became in his later life was simply a reflection of all this. He is a dream bender. When I say dream bender, I want to say that what an airbender does with air, Freddy does with dreams. And then some more. You see, this guy can totally play with dreams and is practically an omnipresent and omnipotent godlike being in the dream world. In this dream world, or dream realm, Freddy rules over people, at least everyone who fears him. I'll come to this at length in a later entry, but for now, let me just establish that Freddy's powers and abilities are sourced from the fear that people feel towards him. Any child who fears him, Freddy can invade their dreams and can do practically anything that one can imagine, appearing out of nowhere, changing his shape and size, changing the environment and physical surroundings in a person's dream. All of these things come pretty easy to him. Furthermore, he can manipulate the dreams in accordance with the subject's fears, insecurities, aspirations, personality, etc. For instance, if you're a young girl wanting to be a TV star, he would probably kill you by bashing your head against a TV. What happens in the dreams stays in the dreams. Not. Yeah, like, this is probably the most intriguing thing about Freddy and his powers over his victims. So, we've established that he can invade just about anyone's dreams on Elm Street. Well, anyone who fears him and remembers him. But how is it that he's able to kill people in violent ways while he's just invading your dreams? That's because whatever things he does in the dreams, whatever pain and injuries he inflicts upon you in the dreams, they get reflected in the real world. So, if he cuts your arm in the dream, it will cross over and your arm will be cut in the real world too. Which brings me to my next point.
To the goal.
Freddy can kill you by invading your dreams. So yeah, because Freddy can hurt you in waking life by exploiting your dream realm, he can also kill you by killing you when you're sleeping like a baby. To do this, he of course uses his dream world powers, which basically makes the victim fear him more, which in turn gives him more powers. He manipulates the surrounding and environment to resonate with the victim's personality and fear, but he also uses his clawed glove to do the deed. For instance, remember Debbie from the movies? Well, the poor child hated bugs, and Freddy turned her into a cockroach before crushing her. So this guy's idea of poetic justice is pretty messed up. Then there was Taran, who unfortunately had a long history of drug abuse, specifically heroin. So what does Freddy do in Taran's case? Well, he injects an overdose of cocaine into his veins. Poor guy. This thing about using your own psyche against you makes Freddy a real cruel and cunning killer. I mean, he's not a crazed slasher like Jason or Michael. I mean, yes, he's totally a slasher, but he doesn't just kill out of rage. He also uses your own desires and fears against you to make your death increasingly troublesome and tormenting. Jason and Michael just go for the kill. They don't care about torturing you before doing so, and they don't even derive any pleasure out of your psychological hardships.
It's a boy!
Does he have any sort of telepathic abilities? Yes, of course. I mean, the fact that he can pick up the hopes and fears of his victims are a proof of his abilities, his psychic and telepathic abilities. It's proof that he can be empathetic or telepathic. In fact, these powers help him a great deal in being who he is, a source of absolute fear. The mass psychosis he spreads across the town wouldn't be as effective if he didn't torture people both psychologically and physically. I mean, think about it. You will be afraid of a serial killer, all right, but if that serial killer knows about your darkest desires and warmest hopes, you'd be afraid a tad more, because now the killer can use them against you in the worst possible ways. And good old Freddy uses this ability in the most efficient of ways he can. But since I've already spoken about them at length in the previous few entries, I won't repeat myself here. So let's move on to the next one. The source of Freddy's powers are three ancient demonic dream demons. So the source of Freddy's powers are basically dream demons, who in my opinion are from a whole other realm. They were first introduced in Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which is actually the 6th installment to the franchise and was intended to be the final one. But then the 7th film happened. Anyway, one major issue that I have with the dream demons is that they seem pretty much an afterthought and an oversimplified answer to Freddy's magnificent powers. Anyway, these guys kind of look like floating skeletal snakes and were brought to life by Jim Fowler, who used animatronics. He, along with Jennifer Howard, F. Lee Stone, Brett Alexander, Adam DeFelice, and John Agnew, manipulated the animatronics to give the demons their movement and levitation. So what do the dream demons want from Freddy, and why do they come to him? Well, their primary intention is to destroy the barrier that separates the dream world from the waking world. If they achieve this, they would have as much control over the waking or real world as they do over the dream world, and therefore they would be able to spread chaos in the real world as well. Now, in order to do this, they need servants or agents doing their bidding, which is where Freddy comes in. You see, these servants have to be extremely depraved and evil humans, which are criteria that Freddy fits perfectly. In his adult life, Freddy used to be a child murderer, and when the authorities failed to punish him for his crimes, a mob took matters into its own hand and put Freddy to death. But he didn't remain gone for too long, because these three dream demons appeared before him and gave him the ability to infiltrate the dreams of people so that he could kill them. Interestingly, whenever a victim managed to defeat Freddy and put an end to him, the dream demons brought him back so that he could continue to do their bidding. In Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, we meet Freddy's long-lost daughter, Dr. Maggie Burroughs. You see, in the past, Maggie had seen the horrors that her father had inflicted upon the world, and she was the reason why his crimes came to light. So Maggie entered her father's crazy mind, albeit forcefully, and the dream demons greeted her with taunts. So yeah, they pretty much lived inside Freddy's mind, or at least could appear whenever they felt like. But Maggie managed to find the very portion of Freddy's mind that housed his older memories from a time when he was still a human. This way, she forced Freddy out of the dream world and into the real world. Here, Freddy was not as powerful, and Maggie managed to destroy him using a pipe bomb. After this, the dream dream demons were violently expelled from the mortal remains of their servant. Interestingly, the dream demons have also appeared in comics. In Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, the Nightmare Warriors, the dream demons make a final, significant appearance. They emerge from the Necronomicon Ex Mortis and confront Freddy Krueger, accusing him of deceiving them. They remind him that it was their power that fueled his abilities, but now, due to Freddy's misuse of the Necronomicon, they had nothing left. Declaring him unworthy, the dream demons strip Freddy of both his Necronomicon-based reality-altering abilities and his dream manipulation powers. As they revert him to his original, unburned human form, Freddy's pleas fall on deaf ears. Left mortal and vulnerable, Freddy meets his end when Ash Williams blasts him with a shotgun, sending his lifeless body into the Necronomicon's vortex. Freddy's fate, however, remains uncertain. After Freddy's body is pulled into the vortex, a time-displaced agent named Wesley Carter arrives in 1964, just as the police are securing a search warrant for Freddy's house. Remembering that the warrant was improperly signed in the original timeline, Carter impulsively signs it, altering history. As a result, Freddy is convicted of the murders instead of being set free, casting doubt on whether Freddy might somehow return again.
It's Super Freddy!
He can transform into a superhero-like form called Super Freddy. Now, Freddy Krueger has been known to be a bit of a shapeshifter, but the most intriguing version of Freddy has to be his bulky avatar called Super Freddy. This guy is a larger, more imposing version of Freddy Krueger, with a muscular build and a distinct transformation in appearance. Gone is the iconic glove, replaced by massive flexing limbs that give him the physique of a wrestler. His scarred skin takes on a retro gray tone, and his eyes become beady, adding to the menacing look. Super Freddy also dons a gray cape around his neck and sports a black lightning bolt symbol on his sweater, reinforcing his exaggerated comic book-like persona. This version of Freddy is portrayed by Michael Bailey Smith physically, while Robert Englund provides the voice, blending both actors into one twisted figure. In The Dream Child, after being riddled with bullets by Mark Gray, who had turned into his comic book alter ego, the Phantom Prowler, Freddy is briefly knocked out. However, he quickly recovers and transforms into Super Freddy, overpowering Mark with ease. When Mark fires at him again, the bullets have no effect, as Freddy now has the upper hand. He introduces himself in his new form before turning Mark into a paper cutout, quickly reverting back to his original self afterward. This transformation into Super Freddy highlights his ability to adapt and manipulate dreams, making him even more terrifying in his realm. Can he take the souls of his victims? Yes, Freddy Krueger can take the souls of his victims, using them to enhance his power. In A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, Freddy begins by targeting the children of those responsible for his death. As he kills them in their nightmares, making it appear as though they committed suicide, Freddy absorbs their souls. This is revealed as the source of his increasing strength and ability to manipulate the dream world. The surviving Dream Warriors, with the help of Nancy and Neil Gordon, fight Freddy, but he manages to kill several of them, further adding to his power by taking their souls. Freddy's ability to absorb souls is again demonstrated in A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. After being resurrected, Freddy kills Kincaid and Joey before turning his attention to Kristen, who possesses the ability to pull others into her dreams. As he kills her, Freddy takes her soul, but not before she transfers her power to Alice Johnson. Freddy then uses Alice as a conduit, allowing him to target new victims outside of Elm Street by drawing them into the dream world. Each death gives Freddy more power, and he continues this cycle until Alice eventually finds a way to release the souls he has trapped. She uses a shard of stained glass to reflect Freddy's evil back at him, causing the souls of his victims to tear him apart, freeing them from his control. Freddy's ability to consume souls not only fuels his strength, but also serves as the core of his terrifying dominance in the dream world, making him harder to defeat as he collects more victims. Freddy Krueger is a master shapeshifter. Freddy Krueger's shapeshifting ability is a central part of his evil throughout the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. It allows him to take various forms to manipulate and terrify his victims. In the original film, made on a limited budget, Freddy doesn't take many alternate forms, but one notable transformation occurs when he disguises himself as a hall monitor before revealing his true self to Nancy. At the end, he also seems to possess the car that traps Nancy, which throws light on his ability to manipulate both the dream world and reality. In Freddy's Revenge, the sequel, Freddy's transformations are sparse, but the standout is his turn as a bus driver in Jesse's opening nightmare. Later, Freddy attempts to possess Jesse, causing a gruesome physical transformation as Jesse morphs into Freddy during the final act. Dream Warriors takes Freddy's shapeshifting to the next level, with a larger budget allowing for more elaborate transformations. Freddy becomes a giant snake to attack Kristen, disguises himself as a TV to kill Jennifer, and even possesses his own skeleton to fight Donald Thompson. His most manipulative transformation occurs when he pretends to be an attractive nurse to seduce Joey, later trapping him in a torturous situation. In The Dream Master, Freddy again disguises himself as a nurse, although this time the transformation is more clearly his doing. He also dresses as a doctor, but the real focus is on making his victims transform, as seen when Debbie morphs into a cockroach before her death. The Dream Child introduces one of Freddy's most memorable transformations when he becomes Super Freddy, a buff, invincible version of himself during a confrontation with comic book fan Mark. Freddy also turns into a motorcycle to kill Dan and briefly appears as a grotesque baby Freddy in Alice's opening nightmare, which shows his versatility and creative use of the dream world to unsettle his victims. In Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare, Freddy doesn't shapeshift as much, but he uses emotional manipulation by taking the form of Tracy's abusive father, attempting to exploit her fear. His most significant transformation in this film is reverting to his human form to plead with his daughter Catherine, trying to sway her to his side. Wes Craven's New Nightmare presents Freddy in a darker, more menacing light, with transformations kept to a minimum. Freddy briefly appears as Heather's son Dylan and as a doctor threatening to harm Dylan. Interestingly, this film introduces a new iteration of Freddy, with a trench coat, altered makeup, and an organic knife hand, signaling a deeper, more ancient entity taking on Freddy's identity. In Freddy vs. Jason, with a larger budget, Freddy's shapeshifting gets even more elaborate. He adopts a demonic red form when enraged at Laurie and takes the form of Jason's brother, Pamela Voorhees, to manipulate Jason. Freddy also becomes several other characters, including a camp counselor, Gibbs' dead boyfriend, and Mark's deceased brother, tormenting his victims by exploiting their fears and memories. The 2010 A Nightmare on Elm Street remake, starring Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy, revisits some of the original transformations but limits his shapeshifting abilities. Freddy frequently appears in his human form, particularly when Nancy pulls him out of the dream world into reality. This focuses more on his past as a human rather than his dream-based transformations. Can he reproduce? Catherine Krueger, Freddy's daughter, was just a young girl when children in her neighborhood began disappearing, only to be found dead. Her mother, Loretta, eventually discovered Freddy's secret, a hidden room in the basement filled with torture tools, newspaper clippings about the murders, and various constructed gloves. After pleading with Freddy to keep the secret, Loretta was strangled by him in front of a 6-year-old Catherine, killed for discovering his dark activities. In 1966, Freddy was arrested for the murders, and Catherine was placed into foster care. She was later adopted by the Burnham family, with her records sealed and her life moved far away from Springfield, Ohio. Years later, after Freddy had slaughtered every child in Springwood through their dreams, the town's remaining adults were left in a state of mass psychosis, grieving the loss of their children. With no one left to kill, Freddy set his sights on a new town, desperate to continue his killing spree. To do this, he needed the help of one person, his long-lost daughter, Catherine. Using the remnants of his supernatural powers, Freddy tracked her down, discovering she was now an adult named Maggie Burroughs. Maggie, working as a counselor for troubled teens, had long suppressed the traumatic memories of her past and the horrors of her early childhood, unaware of the role she was about to play in her father's twisted plans. So yeah, he could pretty much reproduce, but not really as the dream demon Freddy Krueger, but definitely as a human.
But I found someone who'll make up.
How did his face get disfigured? Freddy Krueger, once a notorious child killer and molester, terrorized Springwood, Ohio. Though his crimes were heinous, for a long time the parents had no idea who was behind the disappearances. Eventually, Freddy left enough evidence to be arrested, and the police uncovered his gruesome murder site, the boiler rooms of the old Springwood Light and Power Plant. There, he had been burning the bodies of his victims in massive furnaces, destroying any trace of his horrific acts. However, the legal system failed the town, town. In their rush to arrest Krueger, a judge had improperly signed the search warrant, and Freddy's defense lawyer used this error to get the evidence thrown out. The trial judge had no choice but to dismiss the charges, and Freddy walked free. The evidence, including his infamous glove, was deemed tainted, as the defense claimed it could have been tampered with by the police. With no admissible evidence left, Krueger was freed, seemingly escaping justice. Freddy returned to the boiler room where he'd committed the crimes, hiding out and likely drinking to celebrate his freedom and plan his next spree. But the parents of Springwood had other plans. Enraged and seeking justice for their murdered children, they tracked Freddy down. Finding him passed out drunk, they soaked the entire boiler room in gasoline, including Freddy himself. When he awoke, the room was already ablaze, and he screamed curses and threats of revenge as the flames consumed him. Though the fire destroyed his flesh, Freddy retained the sinister look he had used to lure children, his iconic red and green sweater, along with his fedora. His charred skin became part of his terrifying new form, with burnt holes and soot smearing his clothes, enhancing the nightmare he would soon become. Even in death, Freddy vowed to show Springwood true fear, and his transformation into something far more sinister had only just begun. Is he more powerful than Jason Voorhees? Determining whether Freddy Krueger is more powerful than Jason Voorhees requires a deep dive into their origins and abilities. Jason, once a human boy with severe deformities and mental disabilities, is believed to have drowned in a lake, but survived until he was eventually killed by Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Ironically, Jason was resurrected by Jarvis himself in Friday the 13th 6, Jason Lives, after a lightning bolt reanimated his corpse in a Frankenstein-like fashion. Once resurrected, Jason essentially became an unstoppable zombie. His newfound super strength allowed him to perform feats like punching off a man's head with one blow, as seen in Jason Takes Manhattan. Combined with his natural resilience, combat skills, and resourcefulness, Jason became nearly invincible. His ability to withstand severe injuries, being stabbed, hung, or even taking an axe to the skull further solidifies his status as a relentless force. Jason's heart is also a key to his survival. If destroyed, it could potentially end him for good, but his demonic heart can also hypnotize others, allowing him to possess them and be reborn. Only through complete bodily destruction or methods that prevent regeneration, such as cryogenic freezing, could Jason be fully defeated. On the other hand, Freddy Krueger operates in a different realm. After being burned alive by the parents of his victims, Freddy became a dream demon, and within the dream world, he is nearly omnipotent. Freddy's powers are shaped by his imagination and the fear of his victims, allowing him to manipulate reality, shapeshift, and devise horrific and inventive methods of killing. His cunning, speed, and dexterity give him an edge, particularly in the dream world, where he can influence anything in his surroundings and weaponize the fears of those he torments. While Freddy is immortal in the dream world, his weakness lies in his vulnerability outside of it. His victims can pull him into the real world, where his supernatural powers are greatly diminished, making him susceptible to physical harm. Freddy thrives on fear, and while this enhances his power in dreams, it becomes a double-edged sword if his victim gains control or manages to pull him out of that reality. So, who would win in a fight between them? Ultimately, Jason Voorhees has the upper hand. Freddy's only path to victory would involve targeting Jason's heart or completely incapacitating him. Although Freddy could drag Jason into the dream world, there's evidence that Jason could become self-aware, as others have, and escape, pulling Freddy into the real world where he is far more vulnerable. Jason's brute strength, resilience, and near immortality would give him the advantage in a physical fight, making him the likely victor in a head-to-head combat. Does he have any weakness? Freddy Krueger's weaknesses are integral to understanding his limitations. While he wields immense power within the dream world, his influence is largely confined to Springwood unless he finds a way to expand it, typically by using someone like his daughter to extend his reach. His existence hinges on fear and memory. If people forget him or stop being afraid, he loses his ability to return. One of Freddy's most notable vulnerabilities is that he can be pulled out of the dream world. Once in the real real world, he becomes mortal and loses most of his supernatural abilities. Though he retains some limited powers, such as climbing walls or briefly reverting to his unburned appearance, he becomes much easier to kill. As seen in Freddy's Dead and Freddy vs. Jason, he can endure more physical damage than a regular human, surviving severe injuries that would be fatal to others. However, he can still be killed by more extreme methods like decapitation or explosions. Fire is another of Freddy's weaknesses, tied to his mortal death when he was burned alive. While he sometimes uses fire to torment his victims, he is inherently afraid of it. Additionally, Freddy's power is linked to the dream demons that grant him his abilities. If these demons turn against him, they can strip him of his powers, leaving him vulnerable. Freddy also has an unusual weakness to mirrors and reflections, as revealed in the Dream Master. When confronted with his own reflection, he is forced to face the pain and torment he's inflicted on others, which weakens him considerably. This vulnerability to his own image serves as a rare way to combat him within the nightmare world, where he usually holds the upper hand. Marvelous verdict. Should Englund return as Freddy? Englund himself has stated that he wouldn't take on the role again for a full Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, but he's open to making a cameo appearance. While some fans may be disappointed by this decision, it's a logical move for the future of the franchise. Englund has even suggested that Kevin Bacon would make a great successor for Freddy, and acknowledged the shortcomings of the 2010 remake, praising Jackie Earle Haley's acting, but pointing out that the film suffered from an overly grim backstory. Given that Englund feels he's no longer suited for the demanding role, it's unlikely he could deliver the same performance that defined Freddy in the original Nightmare on Elm Street films. However, his willingness to make a cameo offers an ideal opportunity to honor his legacy. Freddy's ability to shapeshift could easily explain a brief transformation into Englund's version, allowing the franchise to pay homage to his portrayal without diminishing the new direction. This could give fans a proper farewell to the iconic Freddy while paving the way for the reboot. A similar approach was successfully used in Candyman, where Tony Todd made a brief appearance as the original character, passing the torch to a new version. A Nightmare on Elm Street reboot could replicate this formula by having Freddy momentarily shift into Englund's familiar form, creating a satisfying nod to the past while embracing the future. While replacing Englund in such an iconic role will be challenging, this method would allow the reboot to maintain continuity and respect for the original character while introducing a fresh take on Freddy Krueger. But hey, that's just me. What do you think about it? And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.